There is a place where no footsteps remain. No smoke from hearths, no murmur of marketplaces, no laughter of children playing under the morning sun. All of it, pulled into the bottom of the ocean. As if the earth had closed a door that mankind never had the chance to open again. That place, a city that once existed, now lies still beneath layers of millennia-old sediment. And in the darkness of the deep sea, perhaps there still echoes some final prayer, devoured by the water before it could reach the ears of heaven. The first to speak of this city was not a prophet, nor a dreamer, but a philosopher, Plato, the Greek sage who left behind two enigmatic dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. There, he didn't recount a myth, but relayed what his ancestors had heard from the ancient priests of Egypt. A tale of a mighty city named Atlantis. That city was described as a marvel beyond its era. Concentric rings surrounding a palace. Walls plated in gold. Canals intersecting like veins. And citizens thriving in prosperity, knowledge, and order. So much so, Plato wrote, even the gods grew envious. But then, no war. No warning. In a single day and night, Atlantis vanished beneath the waves. As if it had never been. Thousands of years have passed. Humankind continues the search, and wonders. Was Atlantis merely a moral allegory, fabricated by Plato to instruct a post-war society? Or, did it truly exist as a chapter torn from the pages of history? And if Atlantis was real, who built it? Ancient people, guided by a wisdom far ahead of their time. The so-called gods of legend. Like Poseidon, like Krishna. Perhaps other names for a cosmic intelligence beyond our understanding? Or were they beings not of this earth? Who came, who taught, and then vanished, leaving behind a buried city? And a question that no one has yet been able to answer. Today, let us descend into the memory of humanity, to touch a world long buried. Atlantis may still be waiting to be called by name. Plato and the legend of Atlantis. We do not learn of Atlantis from folklore or superstition, but through the words of one of the greatest philosophical minds in human history, Plato. Around 360 BCE, in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato did not compose a work of fiction. Rather, he recounted an ancient memory, passed down through generations. From his ancestors, through the famed lawmaker Solon, and ultimately from the priests of ancient Egypt. According to their account, long before the rise of Athens, there existed a civilization of exceptional advancement. Atlantis. An empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, known today as the Strait of Gibraltar. Plato did not describe Atlantis in vague or mythological strokes. On the contrary, his account is filled with architectural precision. As though he were recording the blueprint of a city that once truly stood. Atlantis, he wrote, was a vast island. At its heart lay a city constructed in concentric circles. A geometric design rare in ancient urban planning. 3 rings of land were interwoven with 3 rings of water, linked by intricate canals. Not only aesthetically pleasing, but also functionally advanced for commerce and irrigation. At the city's center stood a grand palace, surrounded by massive fortified walls adorned with precious metals, including one known as orichalcum, a mysterious substance said to be second only to gold in value, yet whose true composition remains unknown to this day. Temples, particularly the Temple of Poseidon, were built from red, white, and black stones, embellished with brass, gold, and silver. Every structure in Atlantis, according to the texts, reflected a perfect harmony between nature, engineering, and sacred symbolism. But what truly astonishes is not just the architecture. It is the origin story of Atlantis itself. Plato wrote that Poseidon, god of the sea, fell in love with a mortal woman named Plato. To protect her from the outside world, he built a city surrounded by ocean, a sanctuary just for her. From their union, Plato bore 5 pairs of twin sons. The eldest, Atlas, was granted rule over the entire island. And the city was named after him, Atlantis, becoming one of the most radiant centers of civilization in the ancient world. Yet let us pause here. Poseidon, god of the sea. Was he truly a deity? Or could he have been something else entirely? A being not of this earth, mythologized through the innocent lens of early humanity? If one reads Timaeus closely, strange details emerge. Poseidon is not merely a wielder of divine power. He builds, he designs, he divides authority, and structures society based on clearly defined technical and civic principles. What he leaves behind, from urban layouts to political frameworks, bears the marks of science, not fantasy. If so, could Poseidon have been a cosmic engineer, an extraterrestrial architect, later deified in the collective memory of humankind? This question has stirred debate for centuries. Among archaeologists, historians, and even researchers of UFO phenomena. Could it be that Atlantis is not merely a Greek fairy tale, but a distorted remnant of an ancient contact event between humanity and a civilization not of this world? If Plato's writings are true, or even allegorical reflections of truth, then we may be holding a map to a time unwritten in official history. And that journey has only just begun. The traces beneath the sea. If Atlantis were merely a product of imagination, then why, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, do strange underwater ruins continue to surface? And more curiously, why do they all resemble each other so uncannily? Beneath the deep blue ocean, where light cannot reach and modern technology only grazes the surface of mystery, structures have been found, shaped like cities. Not random rock formations, but arrangements. Deliberate, crafted, intelligent. 1. The first clue, Bimini, a gateway to Atlantis. In 1968, off the coast of Bimini Island in the Bahamas, explorer Manson Valentine stumbled upon a long stretch of submerged stone just 4 to 5 meters beneath the surface. Massive rectangular blocks, as large as colossal tables, lay aligned in clear order. Many appeared to be wedged for balance. A technique of architecture, not of nature. Archaeologists call it the Bimini Road. But where that road leads, no one knows. Some researchers suggest it was a breakwater system or ancient harbor. But if that's true, who built it? When, and for what purpose, in a region where no civilization has ever been recorded? Strangely, this site also borders the infamous Bermuda Triangle, where hundreds of mysterious disappearances remain unsolved to this day. 2. Beneath Bermuda, the Nameless Pyramid. In 1977, a joint American and French research team used sonar scanning to explore the seabed under Bermuda, and unexpectedly discovered a giant pyramid-like structure, rising nearly 200 meters, with a sharp apex, perfectly vertical sides, and an outer surface that reflected strange light beneath the water. Measurements revealed, this pyramid is larger than even the Great Pyramid of Giza, and made of a smooth, glass-like material. But more striking than its size, is its impossibility. According to geological models, this region has been submerged for tens of thousands of years. No known civilization existed here, much less one with the capability to construct such geometric perfection. One theory suggests, could this pyramid have been a navigation device, an ancient energy station, or even a forgotten portal to another dimension? 3. Yonaguni, a city beneath the Pacific. Half a world away, near Yonaguni Island in Japan, diver Kihachiro Aratake made a stunning discovery in 1986. A massive stone formation with terraced steps. Sharp, defined edges, and nearly perfect 90-degree angles. Lying 25 meters below sea level. Marine geologist Professor Masaaki Kimura spent over 15 years studying the site. He and his team uncovered even more. Stone statues, wall foundations, arches, corridors. And even primitive pictographs carved into the rock. Kimura concluded, this was the sunken remnant of a city. Lost to the sea some 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. A date eerily close to when Plato claimed Atlantis vanished. His conclusion was met with skepticism. But none could deny the undeniable presence of that architectural marvel. Nor the fact that no natural geological process could form an underwater pyramid with such precision. 4. Strange intersections. All three sites, Bimini, Bermuda, and Yonaguni, share something peculiar. They lie in regions of anomalous magnetic fields. Where ships vanish, strange lights are seen, and electronic devices fail without cause. These are the blind spots on our maps. Where the boundary between science and the unknown blurs like mist. So what connects these places? Is there an underwater network of ancient cities? Linked by a forgotten civilization erased from time? Or worse? Are these not cities of mankind at all? But the hidden bases of another species? Lying dormant beneath the waves for tens of thousands of years. Awaiting the right moment to return? No one has the answer. But from what sleeps beneath the sea? It seems that history is not merely hidden. It may be watching us. From another plane of existence. The silent civilizations. Let us revisit the history we've always been taught. The Egyptians suddenly knew how to build pyramids with millimeter precision. Yet left behind no early blueprints, no signs of trial and error. The Maya raised entire stone cities within jungles, mastered astronomy, and calculated solar eclipses. But offered no record of how they developed such technologies. The Inca fitted multi-ton stones so perfectly that not even a razor blade could pass between them. Yet, according to mainstream archaeology, they never had a written language. Not just one, but many ancient civilizations across different continents share the same baffling blind spot. No transitional phase. No origin story. Only a sudden appearance, followed by a quiet disappearance. If evolution is supposed to be linear, then why did these so-called primitive societies begin with monuments and knowledge that even modern humanity struggles to replicate? And if the human journey is meant to follow clear steps, from hunting to farming to social order to architecture, then where is their first step? This question has forced both traditional scholars and radical thinkers to reconsider. Could it be that civilizations like Egypt, the Maya, the Inca, weren't beginnings, but remnants? Afterwards, written by survivors. From this inquiry emerged a bold hypothesis. The lost prehistoric civilization. It suggests that before the last ice age, over 12,000 years ago, Earth may have hosted a civilization far more advanced than we've ever imagined. A society that understood celestial mechanics, harnessed energy from stone and sound, and possibly even achieved flight. But then came a cataclysm. Maybe an asteroid impact. A magnetic pole shift. A mega tsunami. Or a cosmic event still beyond our understanding. Whatever the cause, the result was unmistakable. That entire civilization was wiped clean from the Earth's surface, leaving behind only scattered survivors. Weakened, fragmented, carrying broken memories and scattered technologies. They had to start over, but never reached the same heights again. Could Atlantis be the symbol, or even the last stronghold, of that forgotten world? A real city. A vessel of ancient wisdom. Intentionally buried. To keep its secrets from falling into the wrong hands. And what remains? The Great Pyramid of Giza. Machu Picchu. Teotihuacan. The megaliths of Pumapunku are but shattered fragments, reassembled by lost descendants, trying to imitate what they once saw, but no longer understood. Strangely enough, ancient civilizations never took credit for their own greatness. The Sumerians wrote, "We were taught by beings from the sky." The Egyptians referred to their knowledge as the heritage of the gods. The Maya carved images of star beings in stone. Were these gods truly divine? Or were they survivors from an older, higher civilization? Perhaps even not of this earth. We call them gods because we have no other word. We call their past a myth because we have no solid proof. But if Atlantis did exist, and if it did not sink into the ocean, but into the collective memory of humanity, then perhaps what we truly need to rediscover is not a city, but a memory. The ancient astronaut theory. If you heard a legend that told of gods descending from the sky, bringing with them brilliant lights, thunderous noise, and flying objects that rose and vanished into the clouds, would you call it mythology? Or are you listening to an ancient eyewitness account of the first time humanity saw a spaceship? This is where the theory of ancient astronauts steps in. A controversial hypothesis, but one that cannot be dismissed outright, proposing that in the distant past, one or more extraterrestrial species visited Earth. And it was they who planted the first seeds of civilization, offering knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, architecture, even law and spiritual symbolism. Many ancient cultures did not hide this. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, those who came down from the heavens. The Egyptians depicted gods with bird-like heads, blue skin, and helmets resembling space gear. The Inca, Maya, Hopi, and even ancient Japanese, all described beings that were not human, descended from the sky in radiant light, and passed on knowledge never seen before. Now look at the witnesses carved in stone. In Japan, over 15,000 Doga figurines have been discovered, dating back over 12,000 years. They do not resemble humans, with almond-shaped bulging eyes, abnormally large heads, and often what appears to be full-body suits, adorned with belts, clasps, and mask-like features. They bear a strange resemblance to modern-day astronauts. Archaeologists call them clay figures, but they look eerily like something you'd find aboard the International Space Station. In Peru, the massive Nazca stone carvings and the enigmatic blocks of Pumapunku depict humanoid figures with helmet-like round heads, truncated arms, and upright postures, as though clad in pressurized suits. Among the Hopi people of North America, we find the Kachina dolls, sacred figures passed down for generations, said to represent visitors from the stars. They are portrayed with small bodies, round heads, helmet-like caps with breathing tubes, and are associated with rituals that honor the brothers who came from the sky. 3 cultures, 3 continents, no contact, no communication, yet all describe the same form, the same memory, the same kind of being. Is that coincidence? Or is it the residue of a shared intelligence, once present all across the earth, now vanished, leaving behind only a mythologized memory? What's even more striking, the regions where these depictions emerge, from Japan, Yonaguni, South America, Nazca, to North America, Arizona, are all located near magnetic anomalies, zones known for unexplained lights, missing persons, and technological malfunctions. And in these very regions, the Bermuda Triangle, the Dragon's Triangle, Lake Titicaca, researchers have uncovered underwater pyramids with perfect geometry, stone structures resembling ancient radar stations or antenna arrays, strange beams of colored light, green, yellow, that appear and vanish without trace, and most importantly, unidentified flying objects, UFOs. Recorded not in legend, but on 20th century military radar and commercial navigation systems. So perhaps these aren't cursed places, after all, but anchors, habitats, or even portals for ancient beings who never truly left. The chilling question isn't, do aliens exist? But rather, they were already here, and maybe, they still are. But for some reason, they don't want us to remember. And if Atlantis was a city of the gods, then maybe those gods, in the eyes of the present, were simply the first astronauts Earth ever received. Ancient texts and mythological wars. Among the oldest surviving writings of humanity, the Vedas, sacred scriptures of ancient India, are more than religious doctrine. They are a mystical archive of hidden history. A glimpse into a world that modern science is still unequipped to fully explain. Within the epic Mahabharata, a cornerstone of Vedic literature, there are passages that recount a terrifying battle between the god Krishna and his enemies. But what chills today's readers is not the spiritual symbolism. It is the details, descriptions that seem far removed from the ancient world. One translated passage reads, "A single projectile was launched, glowing like 1,000 suns rising at once. That fire consumed an entire kingdom. Wind swept through. Hair and nails fell out. Food became inedible. And within hours, all was silent. As though life had once existed, and then vanished." This is not the language of mythology. It describes a radiant weapon that poisons, devastates, and annihilates. Eerily reminiscent of a nuclear detonation or high-energy laser technology. Elsewhere in the Vedas, flying machines are called Vimana. Celestial chariots that can rise vertically, travel to the stars, disappear from sight, and roar like thunder. Even more astonishing, Vimana weren't exclusive to the gods. In some verses, humans are said to have used them, as if they were witnesses, or even participants, in a war not of this earth. But let us step beyond India for a moment. In today's skies, from US military reports, to former Soviet documents, to civilian pilot testimonies, unidentified flying objects, UFOs, are described with striking similarity to ancient Vimana. No wings. Silent propulsion. Instant changes in direction, defying known physics. Radiant, plasma-like light that shifts in color. So if we remove the idea of coincidence, could it be that ancient texts recorded, with surprising accuracy, events that modern science is only beginning to rediscover? A bold hypothesis arises. The mythological wars described in sacred books may have been real conflicts. Not between gods and demons, but between competing extraterrestrial intelligences. One group perhaps acting as guardians, the other as interveners, or even invaders. And humanity? Not the chosen, but the bystanders. Unwilling witnesses, caught in the crossfire of a battle they could neither understand nor influence. This could explain why the gods of ancient texts wield powers indistinguishable from technology. Teleportation, light-based weaponry, aircraft. Entire civilizations vanish after what is described as the wrath of the heavens. Survivors build temples, carve statues, and write scriptures. Not merely to worship, but perhaps, to remember. To remember an event. A moment. When humanity looked up to the sky, and saw gods waging war in light. If the Vedic texts are not myth, but memory, retold in the language of their time, then perhaps the most terrifying possibility is not that they're fictional, but that we've forgotten what really happened. And if such battles did take place, could they happen again? Now that humanity is once more looking to the heavens, perhaps we'll realize we were never truly alone. Where could Atlantis be? Plato once wrote that Atlantis was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, an ancient term for the Strait of Gibraltar, the threshold dividing the Mediterranean from the Atlantic. From this reference, he described a vast island chain, centered around a city with concentric circles, which was swallowed by the sea in a single night of disaster. But if we take this as a geographical clue, then Atlantis may not lie within the Mediterranean at all, but somewhere farther west, deep within the open ocean. 1. The Caribbean, Bahamas, traces on the edge of Atlantis. Off the coast of the Bahamas, near Bimini Island, divers in 1968 discovered a submerged stone formation, now known as the Bimini Road. Rectangular slabs arranged in neat rows, some wedged in place as if to stabilize them, evoking ancient construction techniques. This area matches Plato's description. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules, near the Atlantic, and at the heart of strong ocean currents. More intriguingly, these waters form part of the Bermuda Triangle, a region infamous for magnetic anomalies, unexplained disappearances, and strange lights. Could this region have once been the center, or the outer edge, of a now submerged civilization? 2. Waters of Cuba, a sunken city with geometric precision. In 2001, a Canada-Cuba research team used sonar technology to scan the seabed off the coast of Cuba. What they found shocked the scientific world. Massive symmetrical formations lying nearly 700 meters underwater, including squared structures, intersecting lines, and pyramid-like stone blocks. These did not resemble natural formations. They resembled a city, with layout, organization, and architectural intent. If it truly is a city, then it sank at least 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. Though mainstream science has yet to reach an official conclusion, a provocative theory is gaining momentum. Could Cuba, along with nearby islands, have once formed a part of Atlantis? 3. Gulf of Cambay, India, a 32,000-year-old city beneath the sea. Moving east, far from the Atlantic and Plato's world, Indian archaeologists made a shocking discovery in the Gulf of Cambay, off the coast of Gujarat. Here, they uncovered a 5-square-mile submerged site, featuring stone structures, road networks, and architectural foundations. Pottery, human remains, and ornaments recovered from the site were carbon dated to 32,000 years ago, though the area itself sank approximately 9,000 years ago. The challenge isn't just the number, it's the implication. Such a date shatters the accepted timeline for the birth of civilization. Could Cambay have once been an outpost of Atlantis, or even an equal center in the far eastern reach of a global city network? A city, or an entire world? We are accustomed to imagining Atlantis as a single, doomed city, lost in catastrophe. But a bolder theory has emerged, and with each new discovery, it becomes harder to dismiss. Atlantis was not just a city. It was a global civilization. A league of cities stretching across continents. From the Caribbean to India. From the Pacific to South America. An empire connected by sea. Powered by technologies the ancients could only describe using one word, divine. And in the wake of a planetary cataclysm, it vanished, leaving behind no explanation. Only ruins buried beneath the waves, and stories sealed in the shape of myth. Could it be that Atlantis was never just one place, but rather the final trace of a world that once was, once brilliant, and erased completely from human memory? Why did Atlantis have to disappear? Why would a civilization described as the most prosperous of its time, richer than Arabia, more advanced than its era, vanish entirely, leaving behind no records except for a single cryptic account from Plato? It is an ancient question, but one that still sends chills down the spine whenever it's asked. Because the answer, if one exists, might shake the very foundations of our understanding of history, science, and even humanity's place in the universe. 1. The first scenario, an unstoppable global cataclysm. At the end of the last ice age, around 11,600 years ago, Earth went through an unprecedented phase of climatic upheaval. Glacial sheets kilometers thick melted at a rapid pace, causing sea levels to rise over 60 meters in just a few centuries. If Atlantis had been a maritime civilization, with cities built along coastlines or in low-lying islands, then its end may not have come through war, but in silence, swallowed by the sea like a sorrowful tale left untold. Strangely enough, the date Plato gives for Atlantis's demise perfectly aligns with what modern scientists now recognize as the time of this global climate event. Could it be, they were not destroyed by any enemy, but by the inherent instability of the Earth itself? 2. A war between intelligent species. But another hypothesis, more disturbing, is hidden within ancient texts. That Atlantis did not fall by accident, but was eliminated. In the Vedas, the Book of Enoch, and legends from Egypt, Sumer, and the Andes, we find recurring descriptions of wars between the gods, involving weapons of destruction, fire from the sky, and oceans of flame erupting from the Earth's depths. Some scholars lean toward the theory that Atlantis was a faction in an ancient interstellar conflict, a war between rival intelligences who once interacted with humanity. The gods, described by ancient cultures, might have been extraterrestrial beings, each with their own technologies, forms, and ambitions. And the battlefield wasn't just the skies. It swallowed cities beneath the sea. In this view, Atlantis didn't simply vanish. It was purged. 3. Erased on purpose. A final theory, rarely mentioned, yet worth pondering, is that Atlantis chose to disappear. Not because they lost. Not because they were destroyed. But because they withdrew. They withdrew from a world that wasn't ready. From eyes not yet wise enough to wield the knowledge they possessed. If they held technologies capable of manipulating gravity, time, or cosmic energy, then vanishing, hiding, even erasing their trace from history, may have been the only way to prevent an even greater tragedy from recurring. Some remnants, the underwater pyramids, the roads of Bimini, the Yonaguni symbols, could be the whispers left behind. Traces of a civilization that didn't want to be forgotten, but feared being misunderstood. Was it a choice? Or a warning? Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. Atlantis's disappearance was not ordinary. Plato described it as a lesson in arrogance. That when a civilization reaches its peak but loses its virtue, the cosmos rebalances through destruction. But what if Atlantis wasn't punished? What if they retreated? What if they didn't die, but simply went into hiding? Then that would mean they are still out there, and they are watching. Not to return, but to remind us. Science without morality leads only to ruin. Atlantis, a gateway to cosmic intelligence. Close your eyes and imagine, beneath the deep blue ocean, where light is only a memory, massive stone blocks still lie in place, stacked like a road leading backward through time. Etched upon their surfaces are symbols no one can read anymore. Not because they are too mysterious, but because we have forgotten how to understand. Occasionally, when divers descend into the depths of lakes off Cuba, Japan, or the Bahamas, they speak of faint blue glows, like the lingering souls of a civilization that has not yet faded. No sound. No movement. And yet, something remains. Perhaps a memory. Perhaps a warning. Or perhaps, a gate that was never truly closed. Atlantis, after thousands of years labeled as mere legend, may not need to be a physical place at all. It may be a message, carved into the subconscious of humanity. A quiet reminder that we once knew more. once came close to the truth. Once lived in an era where science and spirit were not at odds, but merged into a form of intelligence beyond what we now call progress. And then, we forgot. Or were made to forget. The writings were erased. The knowledge labeled as myth. The ruins buried so deep. They seemed never meant to rise again. And yet, somehow, Atlantis returns. In the dreams of archaeologists. In the obsessions of linguists and seekers. In the shiver felt by divers when they touch a stone that belongs to no known era. So then, if Atlantis did once exist, and if it carried with it a light from a mind beyond our comprehension, could it be that it never truly left? Could it be that it's still there, waiting for us to grow wise enough to see it once more?